I'm a 23-year-old guy living in Sydney, Australia, and standing at a not-so-impressive 5 feet 8 inches. For as long as I can remember, my stature has made me feel vulnerable, especially when confronted by those towering figures that seem to dominate the world around me. This vulnerability led me to spend most of my teenage years holed up at home, where I felt a sense of safety that I couldn't find anywhere else. Little did I know that the illusion of safety would be shattered in one chilling moment that forever changed my perception of the world. It all went down when I was 17. My parents had left for a weekend getaway, celebrating their 20th wedding anniversary. With my 2 older brothers having their own places and my younger sister staying over at a friend's, I found myself alone in the house. Normally, this was exactly how I liked it, but that particular weekend was about to throw me into a nightmare. Around 11 p.m. on a Saturday, engrossed in my favorite TV show, I heard a faint noise downstairs. Pausing the show, I strained to hear, and my suspicions were confirmed by what sounded like a subtle knock on the front door. Or was it more like a tap? My paranoia usually led me to assume the worst, but for once, I dismissed the sound, brushing it off as nothing. Little did I know, danger was already lurking. Several episodes later, as I decided to head downstairs for a drink, I noticed the front door was unlocked. It was odd because I distinctly remembered locking it after my parents' departure. Ignoring the alarming feeling creeping in, I locked it again, chalking it up to my paranoia. After quenching my thirst, I decided it was time for bed. I turned off all the lights as part of my bedtime routine. About 20 minutes into a restless sleep, I was jolted awake by a sound that seemed like the door closing downstairs. It couldn't have been the front door. I was certain I had locked it. Panic crept in, but against my better judgment, fueled by a sleep-deprived haze, I decided to investigate. Each creaking step amplified the pounding of my heart as I descended the staircase, attempting to stay as silent as possible. The small hallway leading to the kitchen and family room came into view, and that's when my world plunged into darkness. The front door was still locked, but in the shadows of my kitchen, an imposing figure stood, a towering 6'5" man. Frozen with fear, I watched, praying he hadn't noticed me. Slowly retreating, I reached the stairs, my heart racing. The darkness and scattered furniture seemed to be my allies, concealing my presence. I dared not make a sound. As I reached the safety of my upstairs bedroom, relief washed over me momentarily. Yet, the realization struck that none of the doors in the house had locks, not even the bathroom. The imminent threat loomed larger. In desperation, I searched for a weapon, my hand settling on a mere pen on my desk. Anticipating the worst, I gripped the pen with a white-knuckled intensity. A creak echoed through the house, the harbinger of doom. Panic surged as the thudding boots approached my room. The chilling voice outside my door declared, "I know you're in there, and I'm going to kill you." With a burst of terror, the door swung open violently. Instinctively, I swung my arm, driving the pen into the intruder's shoulder. A blood-curdling scream filled the room as he crumpled to the floor. Seizing the opportunity, I sprinted downstairs, escaping through the front door, seeking refuge in my neighbor's house. Frantically explaining the ordeal, my neighbor called the police. We waited in suspense until their arrival. By the time they entered my house, the intruder had vanished into the night. To this day, I remain haunted by the question of whether they ever found him, grateful that I have never crossed paths with him again. Last Thursday marked an evening that's been etched into my memory, a chilling encounter that has me replaying the events over and over again in my mind. At the ripe age of 30, I share my living space with my fiancée and our 2 delightful huskies, making our home a haven of love and companionship. These fluffy 4-legged friends, however, are more adept at spreading joy than standing guard. On that particular night, my fiancée was away at a hockey game, leaving me alone with our 2 huskies in the tranquility of our home. As darkness enveloped the surroundings, I found myself in the bathroom with the door securely closed, the whirring sound of the blow dryer drowning out the ambient noises. Little did I know that the tranquility of the evening was about to be shattered. Amidst the hum of the blow dryer, I suddenly heard a howl from one of our normally docile huskies. Puzzled, I halted the blow-drying process, straining to hear more. What ensued sent shivers down my spine, a faint knock followed by an eruption of barks, howls, and frenzied commotion from our usually composed canine companions. It was a cacophony that eclipsed any sound I'd ever heard them produce. Intrigued and somewhat alarmed, I pondered what could be causing such an uproar. Perhaps a neighborhood cat or a stray dog, I thought, as I ventured towards the nearest window to investigate. Peering out into the night, my eyes widened with disbelief and a growing sense of unease. Two shadowy figures, cloaked in black hoodies, stood at our doorstep. The rhythmic pounding of their knocks reverberated through the air, amplifying the chaos within our home. My 2-year-old husky, fueled by an inexplicable surge of protective instinct, launched himself from the bay window towards the front door. His growls and body slams against the door were enough to make me fear for its structural integrity. From the safety of my bedroom, I observed the unfolding drama, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and confusion. The taller of the two intruders recoiled, a look of surprise etched across his face, while the other exchanged a brief, unsettling glance with his companion. Their unnerving presence sent shivers down my spine. As the dogs continued their raucous display, the two hooded figures made a swift retreat, disappearing into the night. I wasted no time in dialing my fiancé, urging him to return home post-haste. Through the window, I watched them vanish down the dimly lit road, their ominous visit leaving an indelible mark on the otherwise quiet neighborhood. It became apparent that these weren't solicitors or friendly neighbors. Their selective visitation, the hooded disguises, and the eerie absence of any attempt to approach other houses only deepened the mystery. Gratitude flooded my heart for the chaos-causing huskies who, on that fateful night, transformed from lovable goofballs into vigilant protectors. Back when I was 16, a chilling incident occurred that seared into my memory. It happened around 7 years ago, but the details are still as vivid as ever. Living in a row of terraced houses, for in total, each with its own quaint patio, my life took a surreal turn on one seemingly ordinary day. At the time, I had just started enjoying the newfound independence that came with being home alone for an hour before my parents returned from work. The routine was familiar: lock the front door, double-check the patio's back door, and then dive into a world of video games in my room upstairs. Little did I know, this particular day would be far from ordinary. As I immersed myself in a game of epic proportions, a strange noise disrupted the usual gaming ambience. It was a sound reminiscent of cat meows, but my own feline companions had been missing for months, so the source of the noise puzzled me. Intrigued and hopeful, I ventured downstairs to check if, by some miracle, my long-lost cats had returned. The reality I encountered on my patio was more bizarre and unsettling than any video game I had ever played. A tall man with disheveled black hair covering half his face stood there, emitting high-pitched sounds that echoed like eerie cat meows. What was even more disturbing was his bizarre act of scavenging and consuming cigarette butts from the ashtray. It was like witnessing a scene from a horror movie. Shock and fear held me in place momentarily, and then I let out a scream that could wake the dead. The man, seemingly unfazed, continued his peculiar feast. Racing back upstairs, I locked myself in my room and dialed my parents, who promptly alerted the police. From the safety of my room, I listened to the unsettling sounds of the man continuing his strange ritual. The police arrived swiftly, confronting the man and revealing a shocking truth. He suffered from severe autism and had escaped from a nearby facility for mentally challenged individuals. What unfolded next was nothing short of a nightmare. The man, named Jake in this version of the story, had lived in my house 5 years prior but had been relocated when his sole caregiver, his mother, passed away. Jake's return to my house was driven by a longing for his former home and the routines he associated with it. The police struggled to subdue him due to the extraordinary strength he had developed over the years, a consequence of the muscle tension associated with his autism. It was a harrowing scene as he charged at a female officer, rendering her unconscious. Days later, the police officer returned to share a surprising update. Jake, diagnosed with severe autism, had escaped the facility once again. This time, my perspective on the situation began to shift. Rather than dread, a sense of empathy started to emerge. A year ago, Jake reappeared in my life. His hair had turned silver, but the familiar high-pitched sounds remained unchanged. Instead of reacting with fear, I decided to approach the situation differently. Calmly, I invited Jake onto the patio, half expecting a repeat of the past. However, to my surprise, he responded with a smile, and the tension that gripped me slowly began to dissipate. Welcoming him inside, I observed a profound sense of joy on his face as he reminisced about the life he once shared with his mother in this very house. I contacted the facility, and his caretakers arrived promptly. Convincing Jake to return proved challenging, but he left with tears streaming down his face. 2 days later, I established an arrangement with the facility. Jake, now a friend rather than a source of terror, visits every Sunday to watch cartoons. The once haunting thought of, "Let's not meet the guy on the patio," has transformed into, "Let's meet every Sunday to watch cartoons with my friend Jake." It was a typical midday, and I found myself huddled in my apartment, buried under a mountain of textbooks, desperately trying to absorb the information for an upcoming exam. Stress clung to me like an unwanted shadow, making it nearly impossible to focus on anything other than the impending academic challenge. As I wrestled with complex concepts and anxiously flipped through pages, the persistent doorbell shattered the fragile peace of my study session. Sighing, I set my books aside and reluctantly made my way to the front door. Upon opening it, I was met with the gaze of a man in his mid-30s, his average build and construction worker attire giving off an air of normalcy. He explained that he urgently needed $50 to fix a pipe, a situation apparently triggered by a broken eave causing water to cascade onto our side of the building. Skeptical but willing to entertain the notion of being a good neighbor, I informed him that my parents weren't home, and I lived with my boyfriend. His eyes flickered with impatience as he inquired about when my boyfriend would return, emphasizing the urgency of the situation. An internal alarm bell rang faintly, questioning the legitimacy of his story. For a moment, I entertained the idea of delving into the specifics. What neighbors had called him? Could he provide a receipt? How much would this supposedly urgent repair cost? But unease crept in, and I hesitated. 100-pound worrywart, I probably looked more like a teenager than a 22-year-old. I felt a twinge of regret for admitting I was home alone. In a cautious attempt to defuse the situation, I promised him to discuss the matter with my boyfriend when he returned in an hour. The man acquiesced, but instead of leaving immediately, he began probing into our personal lives. Questions about our work, student status, and rent poured out, each answer met with a peculiar mix of scrutiny and mild hostility. As the uncomfortable interrogation unfolded, the man's demeanor took a bizarre turn. He shifted from the guise of a concerned repairman to someone with an unsettling interest in my social life. He asked if I knew other, cute girls looking for a partner, insisting that he was a good guy from the city, struggling to find a good girl. It was an unnerving 5 minutes that felt like an eternity, as he persisted in seeking phone numbers of potential acquaintances. Summoning every ounce of politeness, I deflected his invasive inquiries, stating that my friends were in relationships. Eventually, he relented, offering an odd mixture of well wishes for my relationship and an unsettling hope for a future long marriage. It was at this point that he inquired about the administrator's apartment, as if mapping out the building for some undisclosed purpose. Relieved to see him finally leave, I promptly closed and locked the door behind him. Fear, however, lingered like a heavy fog. I confided in my boyfriend upon his return, the knot of anxiety in my stomach tightening. A quick investigation revealed that the man had duped the building administrator as well, concocting a different story to extract money. The revelation left me chilled to the bone. It seemed like more than a mere scam, it felt like a prelude to something more sinister. Had he scoped out our apartment, sizing us up for a potential robbery? Was I unwittingly marked as a target by divulging too much information? Now, our nights are restless, with interior doors left wide open in a feeble attempt to stave off the paranoia. We've become vigilant, trying not to leave the apartment unattended for extended periods. Living in constant fear wasn't part of the dream, but it became an unsettling reality. It was a bone-chilling winter evening, a few months back, and I found myself home alone. My parents had headed out to the bar for a friend's birthday celebration, and my little sister was away at my cousin's place for a sleepover. In the solitude of our house, with only my dog and me, a sense of unease crept over me. The clock was ticking past 11 p.m., and the darkness outside seemed to amplify my anxiety. Being a 15-year-old, 5'1" girl, the idea of being alone late at night was unsettling. I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was vulnerable, with no means of self-defense if something were to go awry. I had been engrossed in something on my laptop when I decided to get some snacks and attend to my dog. As I entered the kitchen, my dog's behavior caught my attention. She was fixated on the back door, her gaze intense, and a low growl rumbled from deep within her. Our back door had a glass panel, and when I glanced outside, all I could see was an impenetrable black void. "Want to go outside?" I asked my dog, but she remained steadfast, growling at the mysterious unseen force. I dismissed it as her being overly defensive or perhaps spotting an animal. After all, she was a little dog with a big attitude. As I fetched snacks and attended to my dog, I carried her into my room. That's when the motion-activated light outside flickered to life. Expecting to catch a glimpse of a scurrying critter, my eyes widened in horror as a figure materialized, a man, clad in a black hoodie, his face barely discernible in the shadows. I knew he was staring at me, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. In an instant, he darted away, leaping over my backyard fence and disappearing into my neighbor's yard, leaving a trail of footprints in the snow. My heart pounded, and fear gripped me. I burst into tears, reaching for my phone to call my mother, who, in her slightly inebriated state, anxiously listened to my account of the chilling encounter. She hurriedly spoke to my dad, and they reassured me that they were on their way home. In the meantime, I dialed 911, my voice shaky as I recounted the unsettling events to the dispatcher. She did her best to calm my frayed nerves, assuring me that help was on the way. The agonizing minutes dragged on, but soon, there was a pounding on the door. The police had arrived. Though still shaken, I mustered the courage to open up to them, recounting the harrowing incident. They explained their plan to inspect the backyard and assured me that they would wait for my parents to return. When my parents finally arrived, the police briefed them on the situation. A house just a mile away had been robbed, and the footprints matched those left in our backyard. A shiver ran down our spines, but the police assured us they would keep a vigilant eye on the area. The fate of the man who had invaded our sanctuary remained unknown to me, but I hoped that justice caught up with him. The incident left an indelible mark on my psyche, a stark reminder of the vulnerability that lurks in the quiet corners of our lives.